Hello and welcome to Hops and Bros. This week, we're taking a second look at Stouts. 'Tis the season.
For an open window on a crappy world, Max and Chris from Ups and Brew. Ups and Brew. Welcome to Ups and Brews.
Well, this time of year is a very particular time of year where people look for a different style of beer. Now, in the summer, you're going to look more for your lagers, even your sours, to kind of refresh you through the warm weather. This time of year, you're looking for something to comfort you a little. And stouts are one of those beers that can do that. I mean, some of them are very roasty, some are more coffee, some are more chocolate. And they kind of always fit very well with colder weather. Now, or me personally, I will drink a Guinness in the summer. A lot of people kind of reserve that for more of a winter, fall beer, which kind of makes sense. Anyways, stouts. Stouts are really cool. Stouts are really important for this industry. Now, for a while in the craft beer industry, every brewery would have, those four beers: a blonde, a red, a stout, and then a pale ale, an IPA, something like that. And it wasn't as much of a niche market back then. It was kind of, you're trying to have a lot of different flavors for the whole public to come in and enjoy. But nowadays, that's kind of changed, where breweries are going more towards very niche markets. If you specialize yourself in Belgian beers, you're probably not going to have a stout. If you specialize yourself into German beers, you're probably going to have a dark lager instead of a stout. You're going to have something that's kind of similar flavor profile, but very different style-wise. And it's kind of how this industry is going nowadays. Now, it's not rare that you'll still have a brewery that kind of has that shotgun approach, where they have a bit of every style, depending on what the brewer wanted to brew. And that's kind of key when it comes to any kind of brewery, I think, in this day and age, is what does your brewer like to brew? Because he's not gonna, if he doesn't like brewing that style of beer, he's probably not gonna do a great job at it. And Stouts is one of those beers that you think would be very easy to brew, but no, there's so much subtlety, there's so much different grain types that you can use, there's so much different flavor profile that you can go for. It makes this style not necessarily easy to brew, but very hard to brew well. Easy to brew a decent batch, but hard to kind of master in the end. So the key ingredient for this is roasted malts, dark malts. Now, back in the day in England, it wasn't really an issue. You didn't have a lot of light malts. It was mostly direct fire, Archer. What are you doing, man? So roasted malts. Roasted malts were kind of common in England. It was one of the ways, or the method you would use to kiln your grain was direct flames. So you would have a lot of roast, you would have a lot of smoke type malts. It's only later with indirect fire, indirect heat, that the malting process kind of changed and you could get some lighter malts. But that darker grain is extremely important for this beer, was extremely important back in the day. The acidity that is in that grain balances the pH of your mash water, which you wouldn't really think, and especially in those days, you wouldn't calculate pH in your water, you wouldn't really know what you were doing, you would just kind of taste the water and build a brewery there because the water is kind of nice at brewing that type of beer. But those roasted malts, because of that acidity, could really help out with alkaline water and really help balance out pH in your mash, which, as we know, or some of we know, that those enzymes are going to work better with the proper pH to really convert that sugar. Now, when it comes to stouts, it's not only that roasted malt you want to think about. There's also, oats or wheat or different kinds of grain that can add a lot of flavor to your stout. Now, the key flavor profile, whether you're going for more of a chocolate, more of a coffee roast, more of a sweet caramel, or whether you're going for something completely different with that stout. I mean, some people are putting Cocoa Puffs in their stouts, There's a lot of different things you can do with this, but depending on what you're trying to do, it's going to change tremendously the flavor of that beer, so you kind of have to envision that when you're brewing, Do you like your stouts to be a little sweeter or a little drier? That is going to impact, because even though it's a dark malt, doesn't mean that it's going to give you the flavor that you think it's going to give. And in any of those brews, those roasted malts are a very small percentage of the end product, of the end mash build. You're still looking for a lot of those sugars in, so you're still looking for mostly light grain, maybe Pilsner or Turo. That roasted is very much an adjunct or a specialty malt that's going to help bring the color and bring those flavors in. A little goes a long way. Yeah, stouts. Stouts is I'm a fan of them. As I've mentioned before, I'm more a fan of Guinness when it comes to stouts. I had a lot of craft stouts, and I think they're all really good. But with Guinness, with the nitro, they really nailed something there that I think is interesting. And to tell you the truth, I've tried a couple others that are nitro craft stouts, and to me, it's always better. That creamy kind of feel that nitro gives to stouts, it's tremendous. It's awesome. It's another tool that you can kind of play around with. Now, Chris, what's the story behind stouts? I tried to go more into the specific grain and the importance of the style, I guess, of the industry, but where does it come from?
So, what's a stout? Where does it come from? What's the history? What's the background? What's everything? Max already covered the most important part, which is how to brew it and a little bit of the science behind it, which is always super interesting. If you never caught up what Max said, then you should watch more of what Max says, because usually I just cover history and some of couple of very cool facts. But stouts, where does it come from? Basically, stouts, you can't go through the history of stouts without mentioning, is my audio recording? Without mentioning porters. So back in the days in England, porters were massively brewed for the working class. They needed something to quench their thirst after a long day of work in the ports, and having an easy access to cheap brown malts led to those browner, drier, with a sweeter side with roasty notes for beers. So they were brewed on a wide range of ABV, aromas, age at the same time, because yes, there was some beers served fresh, but through the times, a lot of consumers started asking for older beers because they developed some sort of acidity or acid tint to it. A lot of bar owners were saying that they were going stale, but a lot of consumers thought that it was a lot better and they were less bitter. But again, as pretty much every single beer stories that we're telling, new tools and new methods came along, which led to brewers using a lot more pale malts. All this to get more yield into their beers so they can get more money, produce more beer, and just get the better results in the end with the malts that they're using. Since the brown malts were very poor in sugar content, they were able to get a lot more of it into their own beers with the pale malts and also save some money with that. But to keep the beers darker and keep the prices down with the coming of the tax in 1772 on malt, then brewers had to be a little bit more inventive to darken their beers. So they were using, yes, burnt sugars to create different tones to their beers. But the government is a bit savvy. They were seeing a lot of variation into the colors of the beers, and they saw that. So they had to cut on this, and in 1816 they had to put a law to put that as an illegal way to darken your beer. Crazy, right? Now we're kind of like battling on the fact that adjuncts are good or adjuncts are bad. So caramel coloring was banned in 1816. But here comes 1817 with a bunch of new things. Kilning malt was invented, which means that the whole industry was able to experiment with different malts, different malt colors, and that's where black malts were created. One brewery in particular was very, very, very good by using those black malts, and it's called Guinness. So Guinness, back in Ireland, was producing two different types of beers, so two brands, the X and the Double X. Both brands were called porters. One was called Basic Porter and the other one was a Strong Porter, which strongly became being called Stout Porter because it's the stronger version of a porter. But again, as consumers start talking, words getting out, Stout kind of like stick to every dark beers that were not porters. Usually stronger, sweeter, creamier mouthfeel. So it stuck very, very hard on that end. The stouts were the bolder part of porters. Fun fact, Africa actually represents 40% of Guinness market right now, globally. Crazy, right? Just a few steps behind UK. I can't believe it. But I've heard that in Africa, Guinness is considered as an aphrodisiac, so, not sure. Max, Guinness, aphrodisiac? So this sums up pretty much the history of stouts, but through the ages, stouts kind of like evolved into a lot of different styles. So I kind of like got on Instagram and asked the question to our followers, and I got a lot of feedback back. One of them really kind of like hooked me, and it was the fact that covering the different types of stout. So let's dive into this part. First one, the dry stout, mostly known as the Irish stout. Again, if we go back to the law part that I was talking at the beginning, to save more money, they were using unmalted barley into those Irish stouts, getting into a more drier with chocolate, coffee, roasted notes coming out of them. It's probably one of the most popular style of stouts out there right now, but again, one a good example, Guinness is one. Second one on my list is the sweet stout. So we started with something a little bit more classic, now we're in the sweet stout. It kind of like blew up in the market. We already did a craft beer 101 on this specific variation of stouts. It's basically your average stout boosted in every single way. So every single aromas that you can find in your stout, just add it in the natural way. So you have chocolate, add cocoa nibs, you get a little bit of coffee, add literally coffee, and this and this and this and that all through the beer. It became a very popular one in the last few years. I enjoy myself the Garépé from Brasserie du Bas-Canada. It's loaded with cocoa nibs, there's coffee in there. I love it. Yes, it's heavy, it's bold, it's sweet, but again, I think it's a fantastic stout, and also it brings a lot of more new people into the stout market, because let's say darker beers really scare people off, and I don't know why. The third one is the milk stout. Your classic stout with a nice addition of lactose sugars into this beer to enhance the mouthfeel, create a lot more creamy feel out of it. It's very popular in the US, we see a lot of them here in Canada, and I think they're pretty cool. They have that chocolatey finish, it's a lot more on the dessert side of things. It's not like Max said, drinking a Guinness in summertime. Milk stouts are more for winter, and I do enjoy them. Fourth, we have the oatmeal stout. Probably one of the first stout that I drank myself was oatmeal stout from Saint-Ambroise. It's a fantastic little stout, it's creamy, and I just love how this beer is just always the same thing, and on tap, if you can get it, nitro is just fantastic. But mostly oatmeal stout were produced with malted oats. Fun fact, in Britain for a while, not now, the government was recommending in a healthy diet to drink oatmeal stouts. Please don't drink oatmeal stout as an healthy diet. It's not. Fifth one, the foreign extra stout. Foreign extra stouts were brewed as stronger stouts that were exported outside of the country back in the day, and it kind of grew as a luxury item, and since then it kind of like kept that foreign extra stout name, and it's very popular into the more southern parts of the world. Red Navarro spoke that in her native country, foreign extra stouts is actually one of the most popular styles out there, which I think it's pretty cool. I love it. It's completely different, but they do love this type of beer down there. And the last one, Imperial Stouts. I already did a video on this one, but again, it's the monarchy of stouts. It was very popular back in the day. The Russian monarchy was fanatics of this beer, and it really shows. It's an impressive stout. Everything doubled down, high ABV, loads of roastiness. Some breweries age them in barrels. It has a lot of aromas, a lot of flavors. It is heavy, but again, it's the monarchy. So that covers up for me the whole stout history, but also diving a little bit deeper into the different variation of the style. Christmas coming up, Ups and Bros shirts, link is down there in the description. Check it out. Artwork by David Buis. He's a fantastic artist. Please support the channel.
Now, if you liked the video, please leave a like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you guys in the next video.